I'm an electrician in Los Angeles. Today, I was under a house with rat poop everywhere, cut dirt, trying to find power for a fucking switch to power a light. Like, am I coastal elite? And it's sort of like, I missed that ticket to Epstein Island. Like, I wasn't invited. I guess I didn't show up. So here I am. But it's sort of like this situation where it always felt like a jealousy thing. And then also at the same time, maybe jealousy isn't the word, but like envy. Yeah, envy. And insecurity. Because you also look to go the other way, like you go down to like any hipster spot and everyone is dressed like they're about to go hunting for ducks. Right? You know, they're all in Carhartt. They're like what I call like workwear appropriation, working class appropriation, where they're like decked out like they're about to go, like they look like guys who I work with, but they have never worked there getting a $7 matcha.
Welcome, I'm Rob Howe. My guest today is Carson Lere, musician, industrial designer, electrician, and founder of Mr. Goodboy, a hi-fi audio company making some of the coolest record carts in LA. Carson's career has been anything but linear. He grew up playing bass, landed a record deal with Interscope, wired homes and businesses across the city as an electrician, and built a thriving business at the intersection of craftsmanship and sound. In this episode, we dive into his love for music and where it's taken him, explore productivity and value creation from both the corporate and trades world, and of course, unpack why hipsters are dressing like construction workers while buying $10 matchas. Let's get into it. All right, welcome everybody. Welcome to The Little Things here with Rob Howe. I have my good friend Carson Lere, and thank you so much for joining me on my podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
So Carson, you've always struck me as a Renaissance man. You played killer bass throughout grade school. You were in a band that got signed briefly to Interscope Records. You built a business making mobile record carts that's taken off in the hi-fi world. And you're also a tradesman electrician. Could you kind of introduce yourself, your background, your childhood? How did you get to where you are today? And kind of what connects all these dots?
Yeah, okay. Well, right now I am I would say a electrician, residential and commercial in Los Angeles. That's my basically day job. And then at the same time, I do basically hi-fi audio design, mostly music-focused furniture design. So I will design and fabricate everything from the record cards to DJ booths to speakers to, tables with speakers in them, basically. It's like, if it's a piece of furniture, I just put a speaker on it, and that's basically what I do. And so that's kind of where I'm at now. And getting there is, I would say, like it's a lot of failures and pivots, like a lot of them,
Sure.
Getting to where I am. But the through line, when you're asking about that, especially from like childhood to now, is basically all around using my hands and kind of the aspect of like combining creativity and craftsmanship.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my family's kind of one of our key values, I would say. Like basically everyone in my family does some sort of creative physical work, like creative work that requires using your hands. And so I think that's kind of an obsession of mine, and that plays into, which kind of led me down this path of doing audio design from music to audio. It's definitely like it swings the pendulum of like craftsmanship and creativity,
right?
Where music, I would say, is a much more creative art. It requires technique, but craftsmanship is more technique than creativity. So I think in this, for me personally anyway, so like I think I'm in a point in my life maybe that I'm older and I kind of value more precision and like craftsmanship. Maybe it's like that, and maybe when I'm older I'll go swing back to more fanciful, kind of more like esoteric stuff. But yeah, it's a lot of failure, which I'm kind of like more obsessed with now lately. Like I kind of hate success stories. I hate reading. Yeah, just you too. Like I hate reading like bios on successful people.
Yeah.
I find them to be very boring and full of lies.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Especially audio biographies where they write it themselves instead of like, so did I ever tell you, in college, my first autobiography that I read was Richard Branson, that Virgin Galactic guy. He told me in the book, it was halfway through, right? He said that when he was like 9, he didn't know how to swim, and his father was giving him a lot of pressure, tremendous pressure to learn how to swim. So he said that in the middle of winter, he was sitting in the backseat of his family's car. They're driving up to their country estate, and there's like this raging river, and his dad was giving him shit, and he jumped out the back seat, jumped into the river, and swam upstream, right?
Have you ever swam upstream in the river? Dude, you're dead. You're like so tired after like 15 seconds. That's when when you're younger and you swim upstream, I feel like every dad's looking at their kid and like, oh, my son is an idiot. That never happened.
That's why you close the book, right?
Yeah,
like you read something like that, and you're like, okay, none
Yeah.
of this has been worth my time to read, right?
Yeah, so I find it much more interesting to read like a book about somebody who's failed miserably and then it's written by someone else because, like everyone is there to just talk about why they messed up, why they fucked up. And it's just like a very interesting,
So let's talk about your music career though, because I know that you played bass as a kid.
Yeah.
And you had a lot of success with it. You even toured into China, right?
Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about how that got started.
Well, it's like kind of like anything. You just start playing with your buddies.
Yeah.
That's kind of really how it started. And, when you start playing around, you start playing with bands or you start making bands, and I was in middle school when I met my best friend at the time, Tyler, who we took it like too seriously. He was an extremely talented dude.
What did you play?
He played guitar, he's a
Okay.
songwriter, singer. And so it's kind of a situation where I was just like, I'm going to just hop on this coattails and see, I'm thinking like Michael Jordan, I'd be Dennis Rodman, man, nothing, or Scottie Pippen, And so he was auditioning, because his father was a drummer, professional drummer. So he was getting auditions and stuff, and then I would also do auditions with him. And so we started getting like some pretty serious session work, and we played with like Macy Gray and
No way. Wow.
Yeah, we played with her for a while, and I played with Jack Black, and I remember we did one show opening for Ice Cube, which was like super awkward and funny and weird. And all I remember, I was like 15 at the time.
Yeah.
All I remember, he had a giant West Side inflatable hand. That's all I remember about that show. I was like, wow, this guy's got a cool inflatable hand.
Wait, but they're playing rap, and what kind of genre
Well, we were doing like
opening?
R&B. So we were doing like, So growing up, I played all kinds of music. Like, and when I went to China, it was with a jazz band, like my high school jazz band, actually. And so we had a very highly rated jazz band music program by Craig Kupka, who is retired now, but he was basically like one of those like dream teachers. I don't know if you've had one of those, like a guy that just like kind of opens your, like he gives a shit, And he was definitely that kind of teacher. And so, yeah, I mean, and then through Macy Gray, actually, we got signed and we were in a band. It was with my twin brother and we were in a band. And then, it's like any kind of story. The second that record contract happened, like all relationships blew up and families, we weren't 18.
Right.
So parents got involved and it just all fell apart, basically.
You're like Britney Spears being controlled by the parents. They wanted to cut her.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what's going on. I just wanted to play music. And then it was sort of, and then I don't even really remember. I mean, it might be all my fault. I don't know. Yeah, at this point, I don't know.
You blew up the family.
I blew it up. We'll just say that. Fuck it, whatever. So like, that was really crazy, like of a roller coaster at like 16. Like you were like basically I remember we were in the top floor of Interscope, like with lawyers across the way, and it just like blew up. And it's sort of a situation where you're like, where you have your dream, and then it's just like immediately you just like killed yourself, basically. And so like it was like very shocking situation, And that's when like maybe that's what it started with, like pivoting and failing kind of started.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So what was it like being on tour and being invited to China to play music? And who did you go with? Was it just your immediate band, the jazz band? Was it your high school band?
It was my high school jazz band, and which had, which housed that band because we were that band that was signed. It was because we were all in that same program.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't remember how that happened. But when you're like 17, all you want to know is like, you're gonna go to China. Like, oh, awesome.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, awesome. And so, yeah, we just kind of toured around, mostly Beijing and China, kind of all over northern China.
I mean, that was really early. I mean, 2007 was pre-Beijing Olympics.
Right? We were seeing the construction for it. Yeah. While we were there.
And I remember you telling me that one of the most luxurious locations that you had to play at was TGIF Fridays.
Yeah, TGIF Fridays. Yeah. And it was like, I want to say it was across the street from the North Korean embassy. So it was like a weird, like, bizarro land, and great gig. Kind of crazy to be there, but yeah, it was kind of like a weird filtering of the cultures in one place,
But TGIF Fridays in 2007 was very much, high-end street. It was.
It
was very, very top of the line for Chinese consumers.
Yeah, for us, that's a dump. Yeah, not a dump, but like, it's like on par with like Outback Steakhouse or something, right? Like not luxurious, but it was a really nice ride. It was the nicest TGI Fridays I'd ever been in and seen. It felt like they had a stage, like a full stage in there. And so I was like, it had like a Disneyland vibe to it, like a theme park kind of vibe. And then I think that was the restaurant that my brother used a fire extinguisher and the police were called. And then it became like a whole international situation.
Yeah.
And our tour guide, who I guess was in the police, but like undercover,
he was your monitor, your
handler. We called him Charlie. I don't think that was his real name. Obviously not. And he had to pull his rank on these cops that showed up. Basically, like, hey, like, he fucked up, but like,
So your tour guide, you named Charlie, was probably undercover police.
Most likely, yeah.
That's too funny.
Yeah. He was super nice. Like, how long did you live there off and on? How long were you working there?
Hold on, I might just
Is that better?
That's
cool.
Yeah, so on and off, I've been in China for about 15 years. I spent 4 years in Hong Kong, 2 in Singapore, and the rest in China. But even during the time in Hong Kong and Singapore, my work was in China, so I'd have to fly back and forth. And I was mostly posted in Beijing and Shanghai, so these two cities, about half from now. Yeah, I really enjoyed China because I got to experience it pre-Xi Jinping and post-Xi Jinping.
Oh,
so
you've seen the difference.
Yeah.
Have you felt like the United States has changed as much? I'm not saying like politically, but just like culturally, has it changed to that same degree? Or
I don't think for the same degree. No, not even close. I think in China the threshold of the change and the degree of change is kind of like before Christ and after Christ.
Oh wow, that much.
Very, very stark.
Wow.
Whereas in America, I don't know, it's kind of like gradually until it was, and then at some point suddenly it wasn't. And
kind of all at once kind of thing. So like a slowly progressing thing. That's crazy. That's interesting.
So I know LA is home for you. You said you come from a family of successful artists. And one thing you wrote, which I thought was pretty funny, is growing up, you couldn't decide if you wanted to be a stand-up comedian or a history professor.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Well, what's the thinking there?
Yeah. Well, it comes down to like, again, like I was like the chubby kid growing up.
Yeah.
So when you're like the chubby sensitive kid, so you have to kind of hide. You have to kind of decide, like, do you want to hide or do you want to be like Chris Farley?
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so this is like the psyche of a fat kid. All right. Okay. So I felt like I was conflicted. Like I didn't know which side to pick. My parents were always so accepting of like whatever. Like they never cared. It was like a standard, LA white liberal kid, where it's just sort of like whatever your heart takes you.
That's amazing, man, because that's so different than like being in the Chinese upbringing. In Chinese upbringing, they say you have choice, but actually you're lucky if they say you have choice, but secretly you don't actually really have choice.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is like, I think I would have very much disappointed my parents if I became a lawyer or an accountant.
Okay.
I think if it was a pressure, but the other way, like if you don't do what you want to, what you love, which is like a creative endeavor, you're a sucker kind of thing. Granted, they'd be fine with anything, but like they definitely steered us towards that way, like, if you're not doing what you love, then you shouldn't be doing it.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
And how do you know that when they say that, they mean that? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, that's a good point. I don't, especially when you're a kid, you have no idea.
Yeah.
They could be totally lying to you. I mean, what were you being told when you were a kid?
So they didn't have a specific outcome. I think it was a little different in that way. My father and my mother weren't saying you have to go be a doctor or a lawyer.
Okay.
They were saying that you have to give it 100% and you have to do your very best. And if you do your very best, then you'll get the best outcome, right?
Yeah.
But if it turns out that I was my very best and I became like a stand-up comedian, I don't know if they would be very appreciative of that outcome.
Yeah.
Right? But I've always been so fascinated because I do think that, hopefully as a future parent and you as a future parent, I do think about child upbringing and the types of narratives and stories and lessons that we share with the kids. And one of those things is ideally I would want them to not chase their dreams, but at least be the best version of themselves, right? And that means that, to me, it means that I shouldn't be inceptioning ideas to them and saying, here's the specific outcomes that I want you to achieve, right?
Yeah.
And your parents didn't seem to do that either.
No, not really. No. They were too busy with their careers also. And so, not that they weren't there, they were always there. What I'm curious to know about you is like, you have always had a office type job, right?
Yeah.
And I have never had an office job in my entire life. I've never sat in a room in an office in front of a computer 9 to 5. Never done it in my entire life. The idea of that scares me, basically. And so I'm always wondering like how a person feels to take that job and to have that job and then to want to not do that job and leave. Like that whole arc. And I've always been curious, and it seems like that's something you've gone through and more.
So, it's a great question. And I think that not a lot of people know, but I grew up not like that. So I grew up, my father was selling sunglasses, first in the flea markets and then later in his own store, right? And then later multiple stores. So growing up, me and my sisters and my brother, we all took turns during summer, basically part-time and sometimes full-time for months at a time. We would work in these stores illegally, selling sunglasses, right?
Yeah.
And we were selling them at some point.
Like,
the brand was,
with the jacket, and you're like,
no. That's when he first started, right? But when we got into the picture, we were selling sunglasses at Nordstrom, like below. We had a store right under Nordstrom, right? And we had a store at Fisherman's Wharf, Pier 39, and stuff like that. And so much of my teen years and my preteen years, I learned how to talk to people through selling sunglasses. And
oh, interesting. Yeah.
That's kind of how I always envisioned my own work ethic. I always thought it to be I visualize it to be very manual, actually.
To be very manual.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Because my parents didn't drive me to the store. I had to take the public transport, which is BART, 45 minutes into the city at 13 years old.
Yeah, my mom would never have allowed that.
Yeah. And then sit there for 6, 7, 8 hours a day and sell sunglasses, right?
Yeah.
And then come back home and so on and so forth. It wasn't until after I graduated university that I took on my first kind of corporate job, right? Mm-hmm. And then in that corporate world, you quickly start to understand that this little square device of a computer is kind of like your portal to the rest of the company and how you connect with each other. And
okay,
right?
yeah, I can see that.
And I would say that by and far, most corporate roles that I've come across, especially in kind of technology, in my opinion, has been bullshit jobs.
Okay.
I say that candidly. I think so. I think that corporate
Bullshit
work,
in the work that you're doing, or in like the actual day-to-day work, or in the goal of the work, or both.
no, the goals are always, the goals are always
Profit
ambitious, right?
and ambitious, yeah.
But corporate work really is, you get what you put in.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't really care about putting in, right?
Yeah.
So they're just really there to collect a paycheck. And actually, they're more worried about not getting fired rather than being productive.
Yeah.
It's very different mindsets.
It's like very Office Space, like the movie.
Yes. Yeah.
Like just enough to not get fired.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And for me, my mentality has never been like that. I just can't naturally stomach that feeling of not being a value adder. It's really rough for me. And so I've always been in environments and positions where I have to produce. And if I don't produce, I just leave, or I go try and produce.
So
something
you're
else.
like the 20%, like that 80-20% rule. You're like in that 20%.
Who knows? Because maybe those 80% are always saying I'm a value add.
Oh, yeah. If they have their podcast, there's a, everyone else is not doing shit. I'm doing something. Yeah. I think that's kind of been my fear of that kind of world. And that's why I like to, start of the day, you have materials. And then at the end of the day, you can be like, this is what I accomplished. And I think that's like kind of like primate kind of thinking in a way, but like, it helps my ego at least to get through the day. You know what I mean? And I look at corporate people, and I don't know if that they're getting those same kind of feelings, but at the same time, they're making more money. And
look, I think meaning is very personal, right?
Yeah, meaning is very personal.
People put their own personal spin on everything. It's actually, I call it the stories we tell ourselves. We're just constantly storytellers.
Yeah, for sure.
But you bring a really good point, because I remember over drinks you mentioned this kind of relationship between America, production, and physical products, right? I've always been curious what your thoughts are, how the production of physical products evolved over time in America. Like, for example, in my experience, I've always heard two worldviews on this. The first is that, we should get back to production, because in an effort to create new jobs, but also things like national security and even national pride, right? If we're talking about on a grand scale, right?
Yeah,
not
like a macro.
Yeah, on a macro level,
stuff.
right?
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I've also heard that, hey, Rob, like, we're way past production, baby. Like, get your head out of the ass and go do something meaningful. Like, use this automation to go and create something more beautiful, right? And so what do you think about this relationship?
Well, like, this is very complex kind of. Americans, I think, is a lot going to be like how I was telling you the other day. Like, it's a lot like how Los Angeles is. It's all more micro. I think any kind of manufacturing is not going to be mass produced stuff. It's going to be much more kind of like how, in a weird way, like how Japan was post-war. Like a lot of neighborhood style workshops. It's going to kind of return, I think, to more highly specialized, highly niche, like neighborhood workshops. Like small scale, small stuff, except for like giant hubs. Like I think probably like Houston area is going to become a massive manufacturing hub at some point. As complex as it is, I feel like it's also super simple. Like there's like people with, it's like there's unskilled labor, there's skilled labor.
Yeah.
You pay more for skilled labor, you pay less for unskilled labor, and America doesn't have any really place for unskilled work on that level.
Yeah.
And then, I guess automation can solve that, but that opens up a whole other can of worms, I feel like. So my experience, like somebody who works in the trades and who works in fabrication and production, small run stuff, there's always going to be production here, but it's just going to be not the scale of like what China's accomplished or something.
Tell me if this resonates with you. So I've been doing more research on like Porsches and cars, right? And one thing that's really struck me is that all the fabricators for Porsches, the people who remake old Porsches to be new.
Okay. Yeah.
They're American.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, but the most famous ones, right? The top 3, top 5.
Oh, like like that one guy with the beard.
Yeah,
the Magnus or something.
Magnus,
yeah,
and also like Singer and so forth, right? And either UK or North America. And the thing is that they're building products, amazing products, but they're building products for like 100 people, or 1,000 people, right?
Yeah.
America probably isn't going. We've probably passed the heyday of saying we're going to build products for 1 million people or 100 million people.
It really is up to what happens in China. China right now is like, I don't know, in a rough patch economically or something. It really depends on what happens there. Like there's not gonna be any major cultural shift in the United States where like people are gonna like buy American and like I will work for $4 an hour to make this thing we could have bought from Temu. Like there's not gonna be that cultural shift here, and they're not gonna let mass immigration into like these. Like if you actually look at it, like the United States can like double its population and be basically fine.
Yeah,
it wouldn't, because
we have enough land.
There's so much land, but the places where these people would move don't want them there.
True.
Right?
True.
So like that's the only way to like create the population base in order to do mass manufacturing production, like of millions of things. It seems like. How I see it's kind of like how you're saying, like, thousands of runs and like, I work and talk to, through my audio design and fabrication stuff, and also through electrical work. Like I work on commercial spaces too, like in industrial spaces. Sure. They are all small businesses and they're all Los Angeles. And, when you think LA, you think like non-tangible work and non-tangible industries. They're all nameless kind of places, nameless buildings, but that's kind of what that's how I see LA. That's how I view LA. It's like nothing like Santa Monica or what Hollywood.
Yeah.
The stereotypes of what LA is. It's all like working class dudes. That's where I grew up with when I was in fabrication and especially like welding and stuff. That's kind of how I see, but again, it's all highly specialized, like the demand, like who you're providing.
They're not in mass production.
No,
right?
Nothing. It's all like, it's all very personalized. It's all like a lot of, and like you are on the phone with the client every day, a couple times a day,
and subsequently those products that they're selling are seemingly very expensive.
Very expensive.
Right.
Yeah.
So then how do you kind of, square that, mentally? It's like you're in the trades, you are obsessed with production, which I fully am aligned with. But at the same time, our country isn't moving towards that path anymore. In fact, we in some ways graduated from that, right?
Yeah. That's what the trade-off we did. That's what globalization is,
sure.
Right? That we said, everyone else make the stuff, and we will be the market that you can sell it to. So that's why, again, I kind of say it's basically it's up to China. Like what the people of China decide, what they want to do, or also like what happens there, because I think we, as much as like we have animosity, like we're so tightly connected, I feel like that there's nothing when it comes to production, manufacturing, that how I see manufacturing happen. When I say post-globalization, I mean like post-China being the manufacturer of the world.
Of course.
Right? I see it's all localized, or it's all through Texas and Mexico. Like that's where I see manufacturing in the United States going towards, because like of access to, like oil, unskilled labor in Mexico and South America. And then, there is a lot of manufacturing in the Houston area, especially, but like, that's kind of where I see also like it's Texas. So like you can pump whatever into the water.
I think America in recent years, like in the last decade, has been too focused on hyper consumption. And it's not just their own fault. It's a lot of it is because it's a little bit like drugs and demand. So like China is the best place to produce $1 t-shirts, $2, chokers, and and a $3 battery pack, right? So, and when you produce that and you flood the market with these things, you're gonna find somebody who wants to buy it, right? It's like an addict
Really?
who wants
Yeah.
to buy
Okay,
it,
yeah,
right? And you kind of get addicted to it because nowhere in the world am I gonna find a $3 battery pack. You know, I am very curious to see what that type of future would look like, but I don't think that's actually going to happen. I don't think America nor China can afford for that to happen. I don't think they're going to make nearshoring work in any meaningful way. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I think. Do you think it's interesting when you think about it's like late stage capitalism, like a lot of these arguments and stuff, and like because what you're saying is like would require giving up growth.
It would.
Okay, and so like that's to most Americans, you're like sound like Luigi, dog. You're like, you know what I mean? You're a damn commie right here, right? I'm an electrician in Los Angeles. Like today I was under a house with rat poop everywhere, and dirt, trying to find power for a fucking switch to power a light. So like, am I a coastal elite? And it's sort of like, I missed that ticket to Epstein Island. Like, I wasn't invited. I guess I didn't show up. So here I am. But it's sort of like this situation where it always felt like a jealousy thing. And then also at the same time, maybe jealousy isn't the word, but like envy. Yeah, envy. And insecurity. Because you also look to go the other way, like you go down to like, any hipster spot and everyone is dressed like they're about to go hunting for ducks. Right? They're all in Carhartt. They're like what I call like workwear appropriation, working class appropriation, where they're like decked out like they're about to go. Like they look like guys who I work with, but they have never worked there getting a $7 matcha.
Yeah, they are.
And it's like, that is also, it's maybe not envy, but it's like a insecurity. Like there's like there's something there. I can't put a word onto it, but there's something there that's like off.
Well, let me see if I understand. You're saying that these hipsters are insecure, right? And they want to kind of mirror another type of lifestyle, which they are, right? In a way.
Yeah. I think it's like a camouflage, like literally, even though they're all wearing camo. Like I think maybe they want, like there's maybe a guilt aspect to it.
Oh, because I get your point, because they're not actually building things.
No.
They're not producing.
No. And maybe it comes to like what you were feeling being in a corporate job. And that's why I have never met corporate people. I've never worked with them.
Yeah.
I work with cave people, like basically.
Yeah.
Some very smart people.
Of course.
But their jobs are kind of stigmatized by the rest of the culture. Yeah.
Okay, I see your point.
Yeah.
Well, they are certainly romanticizing
Yes.
working, laboring life, right?
Yeah.
And I think they're missing a lot of that in their own human element. Because probably the last thing they made was like a gingerbread house in middle school, right?
Their mom made it.
Their mom made that, yeah.
But and so, but what is interesting is like the trappings of like a working, and this goes both ways, though, like the trappings of like the working man, or like what it means to be a man in America. Like there's like the uniform and all this kind of stuff. And for me, it's like you're missing the core point of this. Is like, for me, like, and I mentioned this in the thing you just sent me, like the best part of the job is to like getting a call from like an old woman, and they're like, it's a super hot day, and they're like, my AC is broken. And they have no one else to call.
Yeah.
Their hipster son, who's getting the matcha in their Carhartt, can't help them. But then also the same person that's like the hyper masculine, you need to be, it's all about gains. You need to be in the gym. You need crypto, drop shipping, right? They're not there either, because they're too busy like in some self-indulgent
hustling,
some self-absorbed thing.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's actual like producers, makers that like, and that's the best part of the job.
Let's dive deeper into that concept, because it's very interesting. I never get to talk about it, and I think it's an incredible insight. So let's assume that you have this collection of the working class in America that want to do things with their hands, but for one way or another, they're unable to do that. But on the compensation side, because you brought that up, it seems like as a society, we are not compensating. Well, the markets have said we're going to compensate a pencil pusher, an email forwarder, right? Probably 2 times more than my plumber, for example. Okay. Or something like that, right? What is your thinking, around that? Why do you think that that's happening, and how would you go about it? And what kind of thoughts does that bring to mind?
Yeah. So it's nice it's nice. I'm going to tell everyone on the job that these corporate guys are jealous, man.
Yeah.
But because we are so jealous.
Yeah.
It's like grass is greener thing.
Oh, yeah.
Like construction people, in my experience, may be the biggest whiners in the history of mankind.
Really?
That's all we do is complain one way or another. Like, we act like we're tough. We're like, literally, I've had people I've worked with, it's like, you know what, man, we're holding the line. We hold that line, we do not break. And it's sort of like, bro, I just heard you for the last hour complaining about the most mundane shit I've ever heard. So, like, we are, I don't know how corporate people are, but we love to lie to ourselves.
Okay.
We love to lie to ourselves. I think there's like a difference between like breadth of value and depth of value, right? And so, like, I would say in America, breadth of value is valued more. We did a deli, local deli, right? We built that deli. We built a new business, right? So the depth of value for them is they had no business and now they have a business, right? But that is only one business, right? I think that is like the common conflict. And I think why a lot of tradespeople have a lot of animosity culturally towards everyone else.
Yeah.
Because I think by and large, like somebody who does like email marketing for Uber may get paid 3 times as much as a electrician.
Sure.
Right? The depth of value that over the lifetime of that electrician is much greater than the breadth of value that that marketer has, but it doesn't show in the compensation. And that's what leads to like the cultural situation like we're in now. Right.
And it's apparent because every email marketer I know hates themselves. Like they get no satisfaction. There's no
but most construction workers hate themselves too, though.
Oh, really? Yeah.
I mean, I feel like they hate themselves in the sense of like the work sucks.
Yeah.
And they feel like, in my experience, they feel like they are not respected and not valued the way that they view themselves as. It's kind of like a trip for me that I've learned over the years,
So I want to share a story, and it's going to be a little long-winded, but it's related to this. So I take taxis and Ubers for work a lot, and just like everybody else, but I love talking to the Uber driver. Okay. So I talk to the Uber drivers here, and I talk to the Uber drivers in China, Hong Kong, Singapore, anywhere I go. And I found a really big difference. In China, when I ask the driver, I always ask a question. It's super vague, but I say, hey, tell me one thing you're looking forward to.
Right? Oh, it's true. Yeah. That's how you get in a fight here, dude.
And their answers are typically always the same.
What is it?
The answer is, I don't think that far. I'm just trying to save money so I can send it back home.
That's here in America.
No. That's in Asia.
In Asia.
Okay. And that's both China, Hong Kong, Singapore, wherever, Taiwan.
Mm-hmm.
And in America,
are most Uber drivers in China Chinese, or are they from another country?
They're all local. I mean, they're all local nationally.
Nationally, but they send it back to like
to their hometown,
their village.
Yeah.
Okay.
But in America, it's very different because the Uber driver is actually my high school friend. Like, he's equivalent of my high school. He's Dave, It's literally Dave, right? And when you ask him what he's looking forward to, he says, we're going to hit up Japan at the end of the year. No, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. The difference...
Dave, if you're listening, there's nothing wrong with that, just so you know. Yeah, okay.
The issue is that the standard of expectations on living is drastically different, right? And so, but at the same time, as a customer, in many ways, are paying for... The reason why the cost it is what it is for Uber is because in some ways you're paying for his Tokyo trip.
Yeah.
If everybody is Dave, right? If everybody is Dave.
Who's doing Uber?
Who's doing Uber?
Yeah.
Now, and why that's related to why that I brought that up to what you were saying is because America doesn't have the luxury of having an infinite pool of labor that has a drastically different life
It's
expectancy.
also a burden though too, but yeah.
Right. Whereas in other parts of the world, in many developing countries, you always have that. In India, China, Singapore has Malaysia, right? Hong Kong has Shenzhen. So they always have this pretty much bottomless pool of cheap labor, right? And they can train them to effectively outsource the things they want to do, right? Whereas in developed countries like UK, Denmark, Norway, and America, you don't have that. For the most part, you don't have that.
Yeah.
And I am curious. I actually am more optimistic now because at least in California, I've seen a big shift, meaning that tradespeople, the labor force there's been a lot more both social respect as well as capitalistic backing of trade work. You know what I mean? And I think I'm optimistic. I think it's going to go in the right direction. You know,
What in a direction? How would you like to see it?
so this goes back to what I was saying, going against consumers. So imagine if we shrunk. I know people don't like that word, right? I'm a businessman and I don't like shrinking business, right? But in terms of being a patriot and being an American, I think some part of what I feel is that there is a lot of benefit in shrinking. Going back to a smaller community, right? Going back to locally produced and supporting each other, right? And not just when I mean supporting each other, I mean like both socially and economically.
Yeah.
But I think that if we were to create a less consumption-oriented world and we were a little bit more cognitive and a little bit more conscious of each other, right? Then you could create a better, happier local society. And I'm starting to sound like a communist here, but you know what I mean? But perhaps it would be more rewarding, you know, and that goes back to your kind of going in depth rather than breadth, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. Who knows though?
Well, you know, it's interesting. Like that requires sacrifice, and that's very hard for people to do. And because again, it's like the depth of value that you provide to people is what's meaningful. And I think this country especially doesn't value depth enough. And I think shrinking isn't the right word. I think it's like we have a shallow society. I think capitalism has created a very shallow existence. And it explains why we don't value institutions as much anymore. And the institutions we do value are all kind of virtue signally and kind of like performative. And, you know, working on a house or going to a place, there's nothing there. And then 6 months later, there's a business or a building is like kind of a life-changing situation. It's like very interesting, a very rewarding situation. And I think I agree with you that this country, what you're saying is great, but we're not heading that way, unfortunately. I think maybe it has to get really bad. Like, well,
that's crazy, right?
It is crazy because, again, like with tradespeople, the difference I would say is that needs to change is the apprentice master dynamic within trades. Where, like, who trained me was trained in the 80s and 90s.
I see.
So their mentality is, you know what I mean? It's passed down.
Yeah. You were trained by Obi-Wan.
Yeah, but they're from an old school.
Yeah, he was Yoda.
Yeah, he was trained by Yoda, right? But the culture of Yoda, especially in trades, because we are it is still strong.
Right.
And that's what needs to change. Because the way a tradesperson thinks is, especially electricians or in hi-fi audio, right, or low voltage is what in the trades is called. They want to keep the aura of magic, and they want you to be afraid.
Interesting.
They want you to feel like, I can't touch that. I have to call my electrician because I might die. And he comes in and flips a breaker and charges $100 or whatever, right? But so that cultural aspect needs to change. And so, because you don't get that same experience with tech companies, right? Tech companies are trying to they're trying to eliminate speed bumps. They're trying to pension
candor,
friction.
yeah.
They're
they
trying
want to
to
be transparent.
Yeah, they want to be transparent, eliminate friction, make it convenient and easy. While the trades are like, fuck that. We want to make this as like hard and as scary as possible. So you have to call us.
Yeah.
And I think that is like that side that needs to change. The difference is that I don't know which one needs to come first, because the consumer needs to understand the value and the depth of value that those industries provide. So I don't know what needs to come first, but I think you might be right that it just needs.
In my experience, when it's always the chicken or the egg problem, in my experience, the solution has always been supply first, the chicken. We have to go and put our best foot forward.
Yeah,
I think we just came up with a new business plan, man. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think so. Right? I mean, there's going to be massive pushback from the tradespeople, and I think that is maybe the future of manufacturing, where it's more of a service first, service forward, production second. I think that is the key for American production.
It's possible.
Yeah, it's possible.
All right, Carson. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you.
Joining me here tonight. It was a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.